conversations to a close, and I invite you to come here and be in this room and enjoying the savory delights of Sunil. So our caterer today is a good friend of mine. His name is Sunil Patel, and he runs Patchwork Urban Farms in Riverton. So Sunil is quite a renaissance person in our community. He started Patchwork Urban Farms, which is it is a nonprofit that was weaving to people's backyards and creating a community supported agriculture model so that people could share their land in exchange for food for themselves and others. And so Patchwork Urban Farms still exists. It's in a different iteration of itself 8 years later, but he is a visionary. He is a creative food celebrant in our community, and I highly recommend him and his work. He also, kudos to Keeler's Design, he also works for us in the field staff. And so I get to meet him pretty regularly, moving mulch, talking about site planning and design. And so I'm glad to be weaving him into the food and the nourishment that you're experiencing in your bodies. So if you wanted information, Sunil Patel, Patchwork Urban Farms and Catering, you can find it on Facebook. And so he occasionally will have pop-ups, and that happens in Weaverville, in West Asheville. He also does a lot of cooking for Solid Remedies in town and in the satellite center, or satellite center restaurant in Leicester. And yeah, so he makes a lot of different kinds of appearances, but he's a local farmer. And I was a little late on bringing him my own potatoes, but I grew my first sweet potatoes. Oh, yay! That's what they look like when they come out of the ground. Does anyone else made great sweet potatoes? Yeah. Hey. So if you need your hands on the earth, I'm going to pass around my sweet potatoes. And these are, I've learned a lot about storage already, that I actually needed more humidity for these ones. Yes, don't put them in your crawl space. Or maybe especially, yeah, if there's a lot of moisture. Although I realize that they might be 80%. And then there might be snakes that eat mice. So yes, it's exceptional interaction. Theoretical experience that I might have. Does anyone else need Sunil's information further? I'm on my way. Okay, maybe I pass this around too. Great. Okay, I just want to make sure that he's represented as you're delighting, and you can reach out to him and say, "Hi, I'm catering." Tell him it's delicious. Yeah, awesome. It really is. I will tell him it's delicious. So I would love for us all to, however you are, if you're eating delicious morsels, if you are inclined to, just to take a moment and close your eyes and connect with your salivatory glands, connect with your esophagus, connect with the food, the plant material that is bringing nourishment to this body, which is a mirror of the earth, is the earth articulating. I would love it for all of us just to take a moment to celebrate the plants that have given us breath today. They've given us life today. So perhaps if there are plants that you want to call out to say thank you to, we can just have a little popcorn moment of thanking plants for about 10 seconds. Broccoli. Broccoli. Thank you, broccoli. Carrots. Thank you, carrots. Thank you, Mate, this morning. Green beans. Thank you, green beans. Jalapenos. Thank you, jalapenos. Thank you, rice. Thank you, coffee. Much people. Ginkgo, I've been making tea with my ginkgo tree. Thank you so much, Ginkgo, for all of the brain support. Thank you, sweet potatoes. Thank you, parsley. Anything else that wants to squeak out of you before we open our eyes? Thank you, herbs and spices. for making our palette so sumptuous. May we be givers the way that you give to us every day. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon now as it is. I thank you for indulging me in taking a breath of some gratitude for all the things that the earth provides for us. It is indeed an honor to be earth articulating, to remind ourselves that we're mostly water, and then our emotions, we flow in and out. We have these gifts, they flow in and out, right? And just like any form of exchange energetically, the point is to bring it in and out and in and out and in and out. And I am a deep earthkeeper on this path of holistic landscape design. My name is Carrie FG, and I have been a women-led business for 14 years, living wage, and we support regenerative landscape design, installation, and stewardship in Asheville and beyond. This is logo, and we'll continue on. So here we educate, inspire, and harvest. And we support that in commercial and residential projects. So here are some of our friends that I've worked with over the course of 14 years. I have written a book recently, the Regenerative Life Design Playbook. And so some of these I have offered classes, whether through holistic landscape design or life design, as it were, which just as a reminder to all of us, how we tend our gardens on the inside is often how we tend our gardens on the outside. And so, you know, as water droplet changes through the water cycle, so too do we. And the more that we inhabit ourselves as nature articulating and inhabit ourselves as going through the menagerie of emotions and it all being okay, the more that we can allow that permission for people to really belong to the earth, really belong to this skin, really belong to the experience of what it means to be human, which in the flux of AI and surveillance and these other aspects that bring a narrative of fear and violence potentially, it's just really important for us to know our compass direction, right? Which is that we're earth articulating. And so it's been my pride and passion to uplift ecology by supporting land and life design solutions. Here are a few of the other clients and partners that we've worked for. I mentor a bunch of Bountiful Cities interns this year. And over the last few years, Black Mountain Community Gardens, I helped them raise a community garden, 4 different community gardens there. Some of these folks I've been interviewed at a podcast, Southeast Women's Herbal Conference. Anyone know that relic? It was around for about 10 years. Wow, what a quintessential, amazing organization. I gave birth to so much life even after its inception. And then Patrick Urban Farms right there. Sunil. Thank you, Sunil, for feeding us. So a little bit about us is that I am an earth steward, an author, a musician, and a space keeper. And I founded Healing Roots Design, which is an LLC. And so we are working in Asheville and beyond. We've worked in Tryon, South Carolina, Pendleton, South Carolina, Charlotte, Massachusetts, Oregon. So folks are available to call us on a national basis on a Zoom call, and we can offer site planning and consultation. And here's my pal, Michael Bartholomew, who's our lead installer and design consultant. He's a 4th generation Mason. And so he does a lot of appropriate tech and alternate ways of saving money, bringing locally sourced materials into our jobs so that they're less expensive, they're more local, bringing the footprint, the petroleum footprint, a lot closer in. And so today we're going to be talking about some themes of ecological, social, and economic ways to support and ballast our lives. And so if it weren't for Sunil and Michael, it would be very challenging for me to be here. So I just want to also appreciate the team of rotating characters. We have anywhere from 2 to 6 field staff members And then we have some folks in sales. So yeah, so thank you for my little mighty team over here. I was, a little bit more about me, I was named as the sustainability leader for the Green Built Alliance, which I would imagine some of you might be a part of the program. If you haven't, they put out this really cool little directory here, which if you're looking for a green building, LEED certified, if you're looking for using earthworks, natural paints, really moving into the fields of more conscious, mindful design and development. I highly recommend this organization. You can also become a member if you like. And so I wrote an article in here, which I put my little business card in here. We're going to address a few of these, so I'm just going to pass it around if you haven't had a chance to see it. Do you want to say anything about that?
Green Built Alliance has phenomenal articles that you can look up online. Really, really lovely, informative.
Cool, thank you.
Ma'am, is there a subscription to that?
To Greenville? Yes, you would contact them directly if you wanted to be in their directory itself. And then they also accept essays. I don't know if could be a nomination to that, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, you can apply to enter to the essays, but these are free. The magazines are
Where do you get them?
they're distributed all around the town, but you can especially get them at the Green Built Alliance office that is in downtown here on
Road.
yeah,
Okay.
It's much lighter, which is where I work out of. So they focus on climate change and environmental justice, environmental education. So a lot of the organizations that are housed there, businesses that are housed there have a common theme. Okay, working, I think. Sure. And I actually have a few too, if you wanted to save my phone. Yeah, I have extra. I only have 3, so then I can find other copies. So we are Earth Keepers to support a more beautiful world and also to support innovation using holistic land skills and strategies and tools and techniques, which ultimately sometimes appears to be a paradigm shift for people. For folks who really want to get it done very quickly, they want a succinct estimate, maybe they have stepped out themselves of ecological time, imagine, which I am kind of chiding it, but also just acknowledging that we are a part of a birth and death cycle of decay all the time. And so some folks, we forget that that also happens to us. You know, in the fall, there's a lot of nostalgia, there's a lot of reflection, there's a lot of harvest, right? Like the corn, and and the savoring of the fruits of our labors. And so that too is also really awesome for us to consider that in our own lives. And so when I talk about a paradigm shift, people can go to Asheville Landscapers, they can go to more conventional landscaping, but they will not get the same product. Because we're using ecologically designed savvy solutions that bring those ecological services into greater integrity from fractured landscapes, from people who are separating themselves from the environment, right? And so our ideal clients are people who are good, giving, and game. They're ready. They're excited. They already have some nutritional awareness. They are kind of spiritually inclined to be more connected with nature. They can be coached. And really, we are trying to bring an experience of nature's enchantment, nourishment, and innovation to people so that they truly belong to the earth. They belong to their backyard. They know how they want to use their backyard. They know how their backyard promotes wellness, right? And promotes energy upcycling for them and their lives, for their children. It brings great joy when we plant strawberries for a little kid family. And then, I get pictures with the little child who's like, hey, mom, there's a bunny. And look at the clover. And they can identify 4 different plants while their mouth is smashed full of red of strawberries. That is the point, right? is to regain that innocence and that deep sense of vital connection, because every breath we take, every food we imbibe, right, all comes from the same place. And how can we be more reverential with the ways in which we tie ourselves together and bind ourselves together? And so it is an intimate experience, it is a relational experience, and it is deeply a sense of place for what we're trying to create. And so when I say we're not for everyone, I would ideally love to be for everyone if we all were able to have a fearless sense of intimacy and relationship and really engender a sense of place. Any questions on that? So some of our adaptive services are unique value, and then I'm going to get to some type 1 errors. Ways that we can use different strategic building blocks to support buying and selling of people's houses, which I know is your manner of expertise. But some issues that we see day to day, common and preventable landscaping, full systems mistakes. So an example of that would be putting the septic field in the prime garden area. Or having culverts be too small gauged for the velocity of the stream. And so, can you think of any other preventable?
Like erosion inside that don't get maintained properly.
Okay, great. So just leaving it bare and open, right? Yeah, for someone else to deal with. So options are out of area experts. Probably there should be another siloed conversations, right? Like, okay, well, we just need to cover that, right? Or we just need to, kind of give you an overinflated, ornamental, opportunistic installation, right? Kind of making some more problems, because they're not in a holistic mindset. So HRD, Healing Roots Design Solutions, is project management, working from the watershed down. Like, what else is happening with the eagle eye view? Where is the water moving to off the driveway? How can we catch and store that water, that energy, right? Can we put it in a cistern? Maybe if they want to have an herbal garden, we know that we need 1,000 gallons of water every other week to service that. Can we find it on site? Can we do what it takes, right, to support a more mutually beneficial way of interacting with our landscape and using those ecological services, being responsible, in response to them, and then ultimately whenever that water or any sediment leaves, which ideally we managed for, is it cleaner than when it came on site in the first place? Missed opportunities that protect, conserve time, money, and resources. So, sheet mulching is an idea. I don't want to Nashville landscapers, but I was just talking to a client who was comparing apples to apples with our estimate, and it's a learning opportunity to explain, what ecologically savvy means in terms of the invisible ways in which we move on site with a lighter touch and integrate the dynamics of the wildlife, the dynamics of who is already existing there in the plant community itself and how fractured or intact it already is. And so, missed opportunities that protect, conserve time, money, and resources. I may talk about this a bit because it's really a big type 1 error for us, and something that we've seen many times over is, not pulling off the topsoil and setting it aside during excavation, during a new construction site, because by most of the life, the bio life, is in those top 5 inches of the topsoil. And so if that gets under, subsoil and buried, we've lost hundreds of years of the ecological service of the forest to do what the forest does, which is make topsoil and break down and decompose. And so, protecting, conserving ought to be our imperative when we think about the long view planning, legacy, memory. If we have landscapes that we want to gift our great-grandchildren or grandchildren, right? Like, it's really important for us to start planting those trees and plant out that orchard, right? So that they can be enjoying the benefits and the fruits of those labors. So we're working on small and slow solutions, which is not like most traditional or conventional landscape designers. But I do think that over time, it's creating more of a absorptive sponge, right? It's a place where Mama Gaia is a place where the earth is restored, and we as energetic beings feel that. We know that when we walk in a site that is intact. Can you all come to mind of a, a house site or maybe a commercial site where there was appropriate landscaping, right? There was like, places of closure and places of open expanse. There was view shed, right? There was care, and you could see that through the details. And so it's through those details that we're really emphasizing that intimacy, that sense of place, that sense of relationship. Regenerative life design is an inner and outer design philosophy. So I wrote about it in the book here, which I think I'll just pass it around and you're welcome to take a look at it. There's 2 songs and meditations as well that go along in that, but essentially it's this conversation about how we tend our garden on the inside is how we tend our garden on the outside. So if I learn about a new client, she's like, Carrie, I'm so embarrassed. I don't want to go out there. It's so messy. I'm like, well, it's just nature doing what it does. Like, what do you think is messy on the inside of you? Like, what are you scared to not see? And maybe that's a little edgy for a landscape designer, but this is also coaching. This is counseling. This is being seen by another person, right? I've had so many metaphysical conversations around compost. If you want to go to church, let's talk about compost, about how people can transmute their grief, right, their sorrows, the loss of a loved one. Nothing is ever lost. It all goes and is nourishment for something else. So how many times can humans learn that, embody that, be fresh within that, That's the paradigm shift that we're talking about. Long-term vision with that small upfront budget. So we work with folks on stewardship or maintenance plans, which is a fancy way of us saying that, we want to support the forest. We want to remove opportunistic species. We want to reduce some of and I say opportunistic species, so that's like kudzu, honeysuckle, Japanese honeysuckle, Japanese knotweed, stilt grass. Tell me any more that you know. Great. No, we didn't, but yes, she's there. Tree of heaven. Mom. So, wait, Sister Ivy, that was 90 in this category. Yeah, so so the stewardship maintenance plan gives us an opportunity to be more involved on a site. And we work in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months segments. We break it down into monthly or month touch-ins. And so sometimes that'll look like, there's 5 acres. They have 3 acres of forest that is in like moderate care and health. So we want to decrease the opportunistic species and curtail them and prune them back. We might need to do some pruning for the overstory. We might add some more natives and bring in some Solomon seal or bloodroot or some of our ephemerals, and so to rehabilitate the site. It also might mean like, there's a deep erosive slope. We'll get to that, and immediately we have like a risk area where there's a bit steep drop and we need to put an evergreen screen immediately for the children, for example. So the stewardship plan is like, okay, we can do these 3 things in a year time and it'll cost you this amount of money, most like break it out into the course of 12 times. So the stewardship maintenance plan is a really awesome idea for folks who want to empower the steward in themselves and also get some support and guidance.
Question for you. I might have a client for you.
Cool.
What do you do with like 10 acres of woods that has really very few natives left? It was maybe pasture at one point, now it's full of poison ivy, bittersweet.
Mm-hmm.
How do you bring that back? It's such a large scale area, handful.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you don't spray.
We do not spray. Yeah, so working with the forested landscape and then also the recently raised forested landscape is something that we tend to most often. We do get a lot of calls from poison ivy and essentially to reinstill the native understory to overstory relationship. So poison ivy and a lot of opportunistic species come in when there's a hole punched into the forest, right? And they are the fastest climber growers. They root really quick. They spend most of their energy going up, right? And or like sending themselves across a surface really quick, like still grass I'm thinking about, right? Like she just
Right,
really
and
fast, like,
the natives.
so part of that, I think, we do a bunch of different types of strategies and techniques, but mostly it's to really get the forest canopy established as soon as possible, whether that's through shrubs, or trees. It could be an orchard situation. We have used, a few ways that really help to, irradiate the soil so that some of those opportunistic species seeds reduce in vigor over time. There are some aesthetically pleasing and less aesthetically pleasing ways to use ecological time to our advantage, and it's a wound, right? And so to think that a wound will recover in 1 year or 2 years' time is a little unrealistic, but in 10-year time, absolutely. So I think that that's part of the resiliency of, the earth, and to allow humans to lean into that, as well as using appropriate ecologically savvy tools to use ecological time to our advantage. Like now would be a wonderful time to install some trees. And then in the springtime would be a wonderful time. And if anything, definitely ground cover. It could be cover crop. It could be without even seeing it. I would want to know as well simple. And I'd like to know what the basic understory plant community is that we're talking about, and the elevation and the solar aspect. So there would be some things that I need to know about before I could give you some suggestions back. But yes, the site visit is very appropriate and really possible.
I've
Yes.
heard, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I've heard that vinegar is a great solution, vinegar and water, to get rid of the poison of food. Have you experienced
People
that?
use vinegar, people use salt. Clove oil is really hot. It's good for siltgrass. The challenges with using even natural or organic herbicides is that it still stays in the environment, and it's still negatively impacting the other plants that might be more sensitive. So yes, vinegar is good. But for a acre of poison ivy or 10 acres of poison ivy, that would be an incredible amount of vinegar. That would be a really,
But it's cheap. And you mix it with water.
and it also, if any rain comes, then that really negates the power of vinegar. So I'd look at other factors.
What I do, because I have trouble with poison ivy, I put down the root. And that's where I treat that root, because the other ones, cool, it's not feelings that will die. I mean, the root, what's your?
I think poison ivy is that, like, the vine layers, to definitely remove the big mother prairie vines, and then also to increase the canopy.
Yes.
Overhead, so that it doesn't get as much sun.
Yeah, that's what I do.
So here's some other things that key features that we install in our neighbors' yards. Compost systems. We work with folks from micro farms, so if folks want to develop income generation or diversified forms of income on their site. Do they have chickens and they want to have chestnuts in 7 years, and they want to be known for a cut your own flower bouquet, and they have some blueberries, that kind of situation. Detoxification, revitalization of soils and gardens, rooftop gardens, outdoor kitchens, herb spirals, edible gardens, some of my favorites.
Can you define detoxification?
Sure, so there's a lot of immune compromised folks. And people don't necessarily know, but those galvanized aluminum troughs leach. So people who I carry on organic, I'm so excited, I got some non-GMO, non-hybrid variety, special local varietal seeds, and they're planting them in galvanized steel drums. And they're wondering why they have high metal in their blood, for example. So and then people use, as creosote treated lumber for their raised beds. So the detail, so a holistic landscaper, a holistic person would look from, all the materials that are going into, everything going into my body physically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I didn't know, I mean, detoxification of land for people, so I was kind of thinking in terms of, like, I live on a farm that my family's been there since the 1800s, so there's a lot of Roundup on that farm.
So much.
And
Yes.
they're old school
Yeah.
farmers, so,
Yeah. So biomediation is also a part of that. So using plants that uptake those minerals, or lead, for example, and safely disposing of them, so that we're using mushrooms to really revitalize the soil and create a whole degree of metal inertness, essentially like neutralizing the CO2.
yeah, we garden on the same spot that they've gardened on for years.
Right.
We're not very good gardeners anyway, but,
Right.
I know what's going on there for many years.
So I'm just gonna move quickly through this because I do want to get to, I imagine we're gonna go more juicy in the question and answer. But here's some examples of some of our gardens. That's okay, you got a dig for us? So here's some examples of some of our edible gardens. We got some Swiss chard here. Here's a pathway in the middle of a forest. It's a circuit trail for a school that we were working with. Here's a polyculture. There's 5 different kinds of plant communities underneath this serviceberry and a goopy tree. So each one is benefiting the soil and the remineralization of the soil. And here's some wineberries. Anyone like some wineberries?
Yeah.
Yes, so that's an arbor. We got some figs, we got some mushrooms. It's an example of a client, really beautiful place. And we've set up a greenhouse. Water system, so these are just like things that we do, services that we provide. Soil and fertilization, ponds, rain gardens, tanks, irrigation. This is an example of, so we worked on a south slope in Weaverville. It was an extremely dry slope, so south side gets a lot of brittle, intensified sun, and a lot of plants end up either loving the Mediterranean climate, or they end up being brittle and very fickle and ultimately succumbing to the intensity of the sun. And so this, we were using this is a swale. And so this is about a 2.5 acre, 3 acre south side orchard. So in preparation of the orchard, we decided to direct the water down on like a 2 or 3 inch decline grade. And so when it rains at the top of the hill, all the water is going to course down our track and we'll be passively irrigating that hillside. So instead of this sun-facing, sun-blasted place, it actually is going to be hydrated. And so we can add plants. This isn't a clicker, like a pink, right? I don't think it is. So we can add plants on the downhill side of this because, water is slowly infiltrating. And so they would get naturally hydrated, natural moisture for those plants, which means that they wouldn't need for this to be under irrigation. It's going to be passive irrigation. So using, working where it counts. This is we would say a zone 4 area, so it's not as often tended as some other areas. And so let's make it easy. Let's make low maintenance over time. Let's move water throughout a 3 acre system so that the net result is we can make an orchard. Sound groovy? We're going to talk a little bit more about this here. Okay, I'm going to talk about that in our tech one here. Here's examples of earthworks, paths, waterworks, and restoration. So some of our nature trails, the fire pit, kind of preserving the beauty. This is what it looks like to work with us. So we have on-site consultations where we go, 1 or 2 of us, maybe even 3 of us will go, ecological designers will go, and we have a questionnaire that understands the why and the who and the so what, and reveals more about the nature of the people, as well as the nature of the site, and hears their goals and understands, you know, what their time frame is, what their budget is, what are they trying to create. And then we create a planning sketch and an outline of scope of work. Sometimes it moves right into installation, whether that's a privacy screen or some raised beds or an herb garden, however. And we can do some education in our living ecology school as well. And then some people focus just on, hey, Carrie, we just want a design plan. And so that starts a series, catalyzes a series of conversations and exchanges. We observe and interact with the site. We bring all the GIS maps together, solar aspect, water, are then a floodplain, all those questions come to bear. And then we will bring a plant materials summary to them. So that's another way that people interact with us. They can just get their maps, conceptual maps. And then legacy care is the maintenance. So it's ongoing monthly or seasonal support. And this helps to just make sure that the gardens that are installed are well fed and nourished, that they are lower maintaining over time, and that if there's a few different elements that we can support a client, a stewardship client, that we can make sure we address those over the course of our relationship. Okay, so here comes the next little segment for us, and this is going to be just ways in which we all can work together, the ways in which you all engage with your clients, and also, you know, being aware that we are in a very, you know, adaptability-oriented time of our lives, sliver of human time, and you know, ultimately to be in service to the whole is a hopeful unilateral priority for us. Collaborative designers of a more beautiful and regenerative world. So we're going to talk about new construction, buying and selling homes, and some pieces that I want to relay to you about how you can engage and feel more supported working with ecological designers. So it's important to bring in ecological designers in the due diligence period. So if you have folks who recently have purchased construction, a home, and they're wanting to shift elements along, they're having some conversations back and forth with their contractors or their architect. It can also really be helpful to bring on to your design team an ecological designer that may have different questions, that may ultimately arrive at a more culturally specific placement of an element that could be critical in how that place feels for that person and that family. So our focus is looking at the functional interconnection of all things, and that is the visible and the invisible world. And so some of that is can be missed when people are under a time frame. They have to make an answer. They have to make a choice, and no one really has seen a deluge, you know, and seeing how the water form flows throughout a site, and they're making very narrow-minded decisions over really a long-term huge investment. So excavation earthworks, I shared a little bit just about how that is really devastating to come into a site where, you know, someone just paid like $15,000 for an excavator to remove 400 years of topsoil and forest ecological services. People want to live in a forest because they love what that feels like, not to arrive at a place that feels raped and pillaged, right? And how often are we seeing that in our sites? A horrific number of them are. The more people who move here, the more people who select marginalized sites for development in particular, the way in which inflation and construction, people don't have a lot of, you know, idea of their landscape budget. And so ultimately we're at the very end, if offering potentially emergency services for things that could have easily been removed, right? Or more holistically tended to before we show up, and the question is of emergency and deep urgency. And I'm responding to 8 yards of topsoil that is now in their neighbor's yard, and they've never met their neighbor because, you know, they decided to not keep key trees in their yard, you know, trees are standing lakes. They can carry up to 6 tons of water up and down their system. And so there's ebb and their flow. And so if we think about trees as standing lakes, what keeps up the mountain? Trees. The trees. So, you know, it may be easier for a contractor, builder, I don't want to rail on them, but it may be easier for them to have a clean slate, but that's just not ecologically appropriate ever. And it also causes incredible disastrous consequences that are unforeseen until an ecological designer shows up on site. Or, you know, I'm looking at a very hairy client, a homeowner who says, I wanted this to be a beautiful, you know, experience for my family, et cetera. And I feel like this is there's a lot of death around here. Like there's a lot of upended trees. Like what happened to the preservation of the place while it's been constructed? Local elements, strategically garden location over septic field. I shared that, and there's a lot of other, situational pieces like the location of the driveway, sort of how many, are there endangered or specific trees and plants to preserve, that ultimately, the form should, like those structures should be influenced by them over vice versa, like what is truly convenient. So finances, time, resources, energy all come into question when we're trying to create a sense of place for people. Building in a floodplain. So there's flood water is inevitable. We are experiencing more unpredictable water trends. And so, yeah, the idea of putting some really large investment in the floodplain does and does not make sense. I think it depends on what are we talking about, and how to, both for permitting as well as for preserving that investment. And ultimately, if the water is going to take it away, well, then what are we allowing to be on that site in the first place? And so these can be our conversations and considerations when we think higher on the watershed, when we think in a paradigm experience of like, that water could be the water inside of my body, so how are we responsible at protecting earthworks without spillways? So I have gone on sites where people have a pond, there's an issue with the pond. And so we're trying to troubleshoot the pond issue. And I've seen many times when the spillway is poorly performing. So it's as if the contractor had a spillway as an afterthought and not really a part of the management of this element. And so, just the narrow-minded thinking does not get us really far. It could be something that feels, we have to like move through and make, changes and make decisions really quick, but ultimately they might come back to bite us in the end. So oftentimes I'll see ponds that have like the same, their ingress, like where the water comes into the pond, is in the same line as the egress, which is really problematic. Like if there ever was a surge of water that came through, it would go right through the pond, right? It doesn't need to circulate or like bring. So it causes a lot of back pressure for that dam of the pond in the ways in which, poorly sited ponds exist in our area. So thermal mass, place it where we want it to be. So boulders create thermal mass. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but if we want a place to be cold, we can make it really cold with different elements of design. If we want it to be warm, we can make it really warm with different elements of design. And for different reasons, humans want warm or cold. So to just have form and function be interconnected is the point here. Address water and easements. I spoke a little bit about the water. The easements part, type 1 error. So we just did an interview with a client who just purchased 40 acres and they have a really ambitious project and would love to get it going. And their road, it goes right through like a puppy mill essentially. And so they have to sort out a driveway. It has to go through like a neighbor's property where there's a whole bunch of dogs that decided on a car. Right, and then they slowly progress to, right, her property. And so a type 1 error is like easements, right? How are you getting to the site? You have all these huge ideas, so wonderful. Now, how do you control the sector, right? Or the vector, like the puppy mill, the neighbor that, has the right of way through this part of their property. And so, we coined a term called neighborottery, which is, the arts and science of loving what is, right? And like embracing your neighbor, having hard conversations with your neighbor about how to make it a living. Because that is just, we all have neighbors, whether or not they're physical or, people outside of us that we need to also consider what they're up to. So we have seen this a few times enough for me to state that like easements, knowing where they are and knowing who's around you, knowing the neighborhood around you is really important before making a precious decision, like where to place your retreat center. Survey, so there's a lot of information on that survey, and you probably all have seen surveys. Yeah, I'm really familiar with it. Okay, so we're gonna pass. Opportunistic species we talked a little bit about, but yes, like, if there's been a clear cut in the forest, $20,000 minimum is what is gonna be required to maintain that, that opening for people. Whether they're putting fescue grass in, which is another monoculture. So there's just a lot of succession. Forests will push successional plants, which are pioneer species, which are the opportunistic species we spoke about in the beginning. So that cycle is extremely vigorous, right? And that will exhaust a lot of sellers, buyers, etc. And so part of the loop is to utilize that energy more productively and more responsibly, so that it doesn't end up being a huge drain on someone's energy resources and patience. And then I also said, prepare a landscape budget for installation. So, so even if the house went up, right, it was $400,000, it's now costing $550,000, and people have no landscape budget. But yet they have in their mind this huge idea that costs at least $60,000 for people to really re-engage and find ways to move through that barrier, that disconnect. Because they indeed could have both if there was a smaller footprint of house, or if the site was designed in such a way that supported more of their lifestyle coming forward in where they're living. So that's new construction. And then buying. So niche analysis and patterns to details. As regenerative life design is in the conversation, this inside and outside, like how we maneuver inside of our house and how we maneuver outside of our house can really bring more vivid imagination, creativity, help us feel more robust, more peaceful, more coherent, more connected, you name any other words you would say. And so, we are really interested in this inside-outside conversation. When we are looking at different houses, it's a very emotional experience, right? It's very nostalgic speaking. The smells, right? The amount of light, all those things come to bear when people are looking to purchase a home. The sun and the wind and the view sheds and the watershed are also really important because they are going to make for microclimates, for possibility of microclimates, the hot and cold piece that I just referred to, as well as, do people see themselves and their different crafts living out a really awesome life where they're living. Sectors, vectors, these are, the puppy mill. So these are things that are beneficially positive on our properties or sites or negatively impacting our sites. And so let's say there, was a factory, a smokestack, or, Canton, a paper mill, for example. If we were upwind of that, that's a vector. So just knowing what's going on in the neighborhood that impacts the site in particular. diseased trees, they take some, they could eventually fall. They could also be in a successional plan to trade out with something more beneficial, like a chestnut maybe, or an oak or something. But to acknowledge that they can also fall down on, on property and just be an additional line item budget. Preserving wildlands. So I think when a lot of people move on different sites, we get really ambitious about the ideas. And part of permaculture is also to hold back and allow nature to be nature. Allow nature to have its own wild areas just for observation, for contemplation, for rest. And so where can we preserve those wildlands? Potentially where can we restore the wildlands if we see the opportunistic species there? Does this person, do their goals align with, the presentation of this house? Kind of could be very elemental, but we want to just make sure that people are getting houses that they feel enthusiastic about, that they can grow into their senses, and that they're encouraged to habitat well in the house as well as outside of the house, and feel a great sense of belonging where they live. Cooperative land sharing options. So I bought House and Land with two best friends. It's part of a movement of people bringing that functional interconnection together, and more, I am consulting with folks who are buying land by 2, by 7. And I'm really excited about people doing this really social engineering opportunity, and a lot of skills are needed for it. So, if you do have folks who are in a cooperative land sharing or they want to buy a house together, I can be a guide for them, and to also just support building that team really well, because there's very traditional and then also non-traditional, more innovative, more receptive, greater listeners out there that we have encountered in our own prospecting of buying houses, rating land. And then the last one I just want to share is Nature's Health Pioneer Mid-Succession. So Pioneer is new construction, right? It's like starting from the very beginning. Mid-Succession has some native plants, understory, and so the forest goes through this whole arc and way to maturity. And so knowing where you are when you show up on 123 Clark Street, right? Like, what are you looking at? What does the landscape tell you about where it's come from, where it's going to, what have been the demands of it, right? What does the erosive pattern say about what could be rehabilitated? What is more helpful? What's the next best step? And so that's what ecological designers can help you do, and I hope that you have learned some pieces along the way with me today. So, and then selling, established gardens increase the value, cuteness, niche, and adds the value of the potential sale amount. Have you all found this?
Yeah, for sure. So it's like going into a sense of place, right? Like a sense of love. One of my teachers says love is maintenance, yes, we can create a low maintenance plan, but do you have relationships that thrive when they're low maintenance? You do?
Definitely.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay, that's good.
I choose low maintenance relationships. Okay. So yeah, I think the more vulnerability, the more intimacy that we want to bring out of ourselves, the more maintenance or love or connection is needed for that. And so there's a lot of ways to bring species, diversity, beauty, aesthetic to a spot. And it doesn't need to cost a lot of money, but it does need to promote a sense of well-being in that place. In that inside and outside, so I focus with my clients on having them tell me what places in their, what windows do they tend to gravitate towards. If in front of their sink, they want to, I want to put something beautiful on display in front of their sink if they do a lot of dishes. And so that inside outside, right, the things that draw us in, where we put a showcase plants might like, when I look up and I see the sunshine coming in and I look out and I see the brilliance of a hibiscus or something, it just invites me to bring my mate outside. Like that is the ultimate goal, is for us to like, just have no resistance to go outside. So, so these are some ways in which living spaces become really more alive for us, and we end up bringing our laughter and our joy and our sense of connection outside. Cottager gardens is a fun term meaning herbal and food gardens. Spruce up the house pre-sale, curb appeal, update with free shrubs, mulch for faster sale. It also helps if it's, if it's just out there for a month or so, that sheet mulch will help keep those plants well tended and hydrated during that period of time of transition. Cover soil, erosion mitigation, stewardship. So, leaving a place better than we found it, please. Some of these places are very fragmented and they have not had a lot of cherishing love. And it might not take a lot of time. It does take a good amount of effort though to transition and to show care back to a forest or a meadow, but I promise you it'll be really satisfying when some of those birds come back. When you see a turtle, when you see a black snake, when you see a kid frolicking in there and you're like, I helped do that. I helped repair this part of land, and in turn I said yes to myself for something bigger. Butterflies. Yeah. And so that's a part of the legacy, right? It's like our human nature is invested here. It's invested in this long-term plan of how we make things better than we thought. And so I realize that I'm over time. Thanks for being a really awesome group of folks. I hope that you're getting something out of this. These are two really happy clients of mine, Melissa and Tara. And so they went through this process with us. We go through a questionnaire, we do a little site visit, we talk about scope of work, we can make a little bubble diagram of ideas. We get to the point of what they're trying to achieve, installation, and we'll also do a design. Potentially, if they have a need for a master plan, we're a bunch of elementals to be more specced out, plant material, that kind of stuff, sourcing. And then some people go on a stewardship plan. And here's some testimonials. I can answer any questions for you all. I can do that too. Oh yeah, gosh, I just kept on talking. You're welcome to join my newsletter list if you want to. So I'm just gonna have that. You just have that. So yeah.
Yeah, this list isn't.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You already got it?
Yeah.
I was looking at your card.
Do you like our card? Yes, please.
And can I answer any questions for y'all? And thanks for being patient with me. There's also more food.
Like an
Our food was, you really made that.